Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. President Biden is set to leave for Europe Thursday to meet with world leaders, and it's looking like he'll be leaving the country without securing a framework for his social and climate plan. The plan has been roughly halved in size from where it stood last month, as the White House makes cuts to health care, child care, and climate plans while negotiating with Democratic holdouts. But the White House maintains President Biden is happy to compromise.
There will be things that may not be in the package he wants to see. But what any president and any legislator looks at is the totality of the overarching impact. And this is on track to be enormous, impactful, historic.
The list of what programs could make the cut changes day to day as the White House attempts to placate both the moderate and progressive wings of the party. It's still not fully clear how the plan will be funded. President Biden has committed to fully pay for the bill without adding to the deficit. The latest proposal is a tax on roughly 700 American billionaires. The idea is to tax the value of their stocks and bonds as they appreciate over time. The Institute for Policy Studies estimates during the pandemic, U.S. billionaire wealth surged by $2.1 trillion, just around the current price tag of the bill. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer repeated what Democrats have been saying for weeks. They're close on figuring out what's in the bill and how to pay for it.
An agreement is within arm's length, and we are hopeful that we can come to a framework agreement by the end of today. But we must continue working a little more to make sure it is the best deal possible for the American people.
Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe, Nikole, Killion, and Josh Kraushaar. Ed is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent. Nikole is a CBS News congressional correspondent. And Josh writes the Against the Grain column for the National Journal. Welcome to you all. Ed, let me start with you. President Biden wants to announce a deal before heading to Europe on Thursday. Where would you put the odds of that happening?
Well, what did Chuck Schumer say there? The deal is within arm's length. It must be a really long arm that he's talking about, because there still are some notable sticking points. Perhaps at this hour, most gallingly, how to pay for this plan. The billionaires tax that's been talked about here in Washington most of today is still something that hasn't been fully embraced by Democrats, given that there are concerns about how exactly it would be implemented, whether it's even legal, and whether it too unfairly targets the nation's roughly 700 billionaires. Another big sticking point at this hour appears to be the fate of paid leave. Will there be parental leave for the parents of newborns? Will there be sick leave for those that may need time off for long-term illness or to take care of somebody else? Or will it not make it in at all? A statement a little while ago from Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, who's been leading the talks on paid leave, specifically says until the bill's printed and it's been passed, she's going to continue negotiating and fighting to get that in, which is a signal that it is indeed in limbo. So those appear to be two of the sticking points. There likely are others, some of which have earthed themselves, others that have not yet been earthed, but we'll continue to track it. Here at the White House, they remain optimistic that the president will be able to get on Air Force One tomorrow with some sense of an agreement in place, but until that happens, it's hard to know if it's possible.
All right. Well, the Senate confirmed 4 former senators and widows of former senators to ambassador roles. Who are some of the notable picks, and what does it say about the president's diplomatic agenda?
It says that if you've got a connection to the Senate at this point, you're able to get confirmed pretty quickly. Jeff Flake, the former Arizona senator, now the ambassador to Turkey. Tom Udall, the former ambassador from New Mexico, former senator from New Mexico, is now the ambassador to New Zealand. Cindy McCain, the wife of the late Arizona senator, is now an ambassador to a UN food program based in Europe. And then Victoria Reggie Kennedy, the wife of the late Senator Ted Kennedy, is the new U.S. ambassador to Austria. Those 4 are through. There are Republican objections to holding up several other not only diplomatic nominees, but others that are awaiting confirmation votes. And every judicial pick right now is going through that tedious process of cloture votes. The White House, I checked with them about this yesterday and again today, continues to insist that they've moved as many of them as they could, that the confirmation hearing process has to continue, and that Republican objections to what they believe to be qualified nominees and a disproportionate number of women and minorities being blocked by Republicans needs to end so that these people can take their jobs.
All right, and Ed, one more for you. The president campaigned for Virginia gubernatorial candidate Terry McAuliffe Tuesday night. I know you were there covering that rally, and while the president often avoids mentioning his predecessor, last night he went all in. Let's listen to some of that.
He won't allow Donald Trump to campaign for him in this state. And he's willing to pledge his loyalty to Trump in private. Why not in public? What's he trying to hide? Is there a problem with Trump being here? Is he embarrassed?
All right, so I checked the transcript. Some 24 mentions of Donald Trump there, Ed, by President Biden. Why is Mr. Biden bringing up the former president into the Virginia race?
Because Democrats believe the way to win the Virginia governor's race is to try to remind voters that Glenn Youngkin is endorsed by Donald Trump, supported Donald Trump, claims that election integrity is one of the big issues of concern before a state that voted overwhelmingly, well, by 10 points for Joe Biden, and that they just believe will help bring home Democrats and perhaps independent voters who don't like the thought of Donald Trump returning to the White House and certainly don't want to see him campaigning in their state. Youngkin so far has done most of his campaigning in these closing weeks by himself, insisting that he won't be bringing out-of-state Republicans in. But, and I think we have this, take a look at this statement from the former president a little while ago, calling out the fact that in that crowd last night, or on the periphery of it, there were Trump supporters chanting, "Let's go Trump." And he said, maybe I'll see you soon in Virginia. We asked Youngkin campaign advisors this afternoon if there now are plans for the former president to campaign in the Old Dominion in the closing days. One of them responded to me with question marks. So we'll see.
All right, to be continued. Ed O'Keefe, I know you have to run. Ed, thanks very much. Let's continue the conversation here. Nikole, let me ask you, there seems to be an impasse between Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Joe Manchin over what health benefits could be covered in President Biden's spending plan. Let's take a listen.
How am I going to tell people in West Virginia that Medicare and Social Security is your lifeline, and you're going to be in trouble by 2026? They've all heard that. What's that mean to me? Am I going to pay more, or am I going to be cut back on my services I'm getting? But yet we're adding more to it. That's the problem.
So, Nikole, where does the party go on expanding health care?
Well, as far as Bernie Sanders is concerned, he still wants to see this Medicare expansion that he's been proposing, which would add dental, vision, and hearing coverage to Medicare recipients. It would take a number of years to roll out, and the cost is quite high, which is one of the reasons why there had been some suggestions about paring it back. And what you heard there from Senator Manchin, which is a point that he's made before in other ways, is that he simply, has a fundamental disagreement with Sanders over this issue, and that he doesn't necessarily believe in, having this entitlement society, if you will. So he believes, things like, expanding Medicare in the way that Senator Sanders wants to do that kind of would be an expansion of entitlements, which, as you heard in that soundbite, he doesn't really want to do. That being said, you have folks like Bernie Sanders who feel very strongly about this and who have been lobbying for this, who have been campaigning for this for years. And, at a time where Democrats are really trying to maximize their agenda, Senator Sanders has insisted that this is an opportunity and that this is something that for him is non-negotiable.
Well, Josh, can you explain the Democrats' proposed billionaires tax? How would that work, and how much of the spending plan can it pay for?
Well, the idea behind the billionaires tax is to tax theoretical wealth from stocks, investments of billionaires, of maybe 700 billionaires, or among the richest people in the country. But there are a lot of logistical and, frankly, constitutional challenges with that. Number one is, do you get a rebate? If your stocks go down in value, does the government give you a rebate? That's hard to see, and it makes it really complicated in terms of figuring out the budget and figuring out how much money you're going to get out of this scheme. The other thing is, the principle of not actually taxing dollars in hand could really set a very dangerous substantive and political principle for Democrats. It could affect people's 401ks in the future if you can tax this theoretical, investment wealth, it could really expose other less wealthy Americans to that type of taxation that has never been done before in American history. It would also raise constitutional questions. So, I mean, I think that's why Joe Manchin has started to get some cold feet. He made public comments today, really expressing skepticism that he would support this billionaires tax. I think it's very unlikely it's going to end up in the social spending bill if it can pass through the Senate. And it is, in theory, ideal. I mean, Democrats they look at polling and they show a lot of voters are willing to tax the wealthiest Americans at a higher level. But in practice, this is just really complicated and is really going to be very hard to implement.
And Josh, just so I understand here, is the constitutionality question, because there's a question of whether or not this is actual income and can be taxed as such. Is that the reason?
That's right. When you hold stocks, that's value that when you sell the stocks, when you make money off the stocks, that's when you pay taxes. A lot of billionaires have investments in stocks and other bonds and other areas, but they don't pay the tax, nor does any other American, for that matter, pay the tax until they actually sell them. So there is going to be a constitutional question of whether that theoretical wealth can actually be taxed. It would be, a lot of experts have raised questions about the constitutionality of such a policy.
Well, Senator Kyrsten Sinema, Josh, opposed raising the tax rate for the wealthy or the corporate tax rate. Where does she stand on a proposed billionaire tax?
Well, it sounds like that is the one area of taxation that she has not had a problem with. But interestingly enough, Joe Manchin is the Democrat that has now expressed public criticism and skepticism of such a scheme. And then that, frankly, Elaine, is sort of the dilemma that Democrats in the Senate have been facing in trying to get this social spending bill written and passed. There are things like climate change provisions that Kyrsten Sinema supports, but Joe Manchin, representing a coal energy producing state, opposes. There are elements of trying to raise money by doing other elements of tax, by raising taxes on the rich in other ways that Joe Manchin supports, but Kyrsten Sinema opposes. So even though those two Democrats are lopped off together as the ones that are the most hard to get, what makes it extra challenging for Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats is that they don't agree on exactly which provisions are unacceptable. Manchin has his own pet issues that he wants taken out of the bill. Sinema has other provisions she does not want to be part of the social spending bill.
Meantime, Nikole, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that she thinks it's enough to vote on that bipartisan infrastructure bill if there is a framework for the spending package. Now, progressives disagree. Is it clear at this point, Nikole, how that's going to shake out?
Well, she's also said it'll be ready when it's ready. And, just in talking to progressives, I mean, since the beginning of this week, they have told me in no uncertain terms, I should say, that their position has not changed in the sense that, they want a guarantee. They don't want a framework agreement. And that's a point we have heard throughout the week, once again, from a number of progressive members. They want this ironclad agreement. They want to make sure that this bill doesn't change in any shape or form, or that if it does, it's very minimal. And, furthermore, they still would like to see a vote, or at least the text of this social spending package, before they move forward with an infrastructure vote. In fact, Chair Jayapal, who heads the House Progressive Congressional Caucus, she made clear to reporters today that she has about 40 members within the Progressive Caucus that may not support this infrastructure bill if it moves forward as Democratic leaders would like. So, in essence, it's almost like deja vu again, because this was kind of the same scenario that we were in at the end of September, when progressives, there simply were not enough votes to help clear that infrastructure bill. Now, that being said, you have moderate lawmakers who have been pushing for this vote for weeks now, who insist that it's got to go forward, and they would like to see it move forward, and they've expressed optimism towards that. But again, it's hard to see how it does if, in fact, you have so many progressives threatening to block it.
And shifting gears, Nikole, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has endorsed Herschel Walker in his bid for a Georgia Senate seat. Now, President Trump has long supported Walker. What might this endorsement indicate about the future of the Republican Party?
Well, it does indicate that more members of the Republican establishment are getting behind Herschel Walker. We saw, another top Republican, John Thune, this week also back Walker, who is a former football player, has the backing of former President Trump. Some, including McConnell, had expressed some reservations initially about Herschel, particularly his background and some allegations that he had faced in the past. But it seems that he has worked past that, obviously, in this endorsement that he gave this week. And I think it just goes to show how much of a dogfight this particular race could be, because, again, Walker would be going up against Raphael Warnock, who currently holds the seat, the Democrat who helped to flip the Senate. So from that standpoint, certainly Warnock has indicated that he is in this race and in this fight to win it as well. But certainly the more establishment Republicans we see behind Walker, kind of showing this coalescing behind him, certainly gives his candidacy a boost.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that development, because there had been questions among establishment Republicans in Georgia who were privately expressing concerns earlier about where it was that Herschel Walker actually stood on issues. So it's interesting to see now Mitch McConnell sending a very clear signal, as you say, about where the establishment is sort of lining up on this. Finally, Josh, a new Politico Morning Consult poll shows that 3 out of 5 Republicans say the 2020 election should probably or definitely be overturned. So how might that shape elections going forward, particularly the midterms?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big challenge that Republicans face. The political environment is very much in their favor. You heard Ed talking about the prospect of a Republican victory in Virginia next week in the governor's race. So the political environment is favorable, but you have the base of the Republican Party and maybe beyond. So, a very clear majority of Republican voters who still are dwelling on 2020, still dwelling on election security, still kind of in denial about the outcome of the last election. Herschel Walker ties into that very, very much. Donald Trump encouraged him to run. He's unclear on where he stands on a lot of issues, but he's been shoulder to shoulder with the former president when it comes to some of these pet peeves, these pet issues the former president has on election denialism and denying the results of the last election. And you see in primary after primary in these key battleground states, denying the election results, playing to that base of the Republican Party has become a litmus test for success. So there are cases where Republicans have a strong candidate who, because of their name ID or because of their strong political skills, has been able to navigate through these tricky waters in the primary. But there are many other races. Look at Pennsylvania. You can look at North Carolina, Ohio, these very important battleground states where Republicans are just moving so far to the right to a point where they are alienating a lot of mainstream moderate voters who look at this election denialism and turn very critically towards these types of candidates on the Republican side.
Yeah. It's something to watch here for sure in the months ahead. Nikole, Killion, and Josh Kraushaar, thank you both very much.